Standing Committee, the Reverend Kristen Coppran.
Thank you, Bishop. Good afternoon. The liturgy for noonday prayer is included in the handout from this morning that is entitled Daily Morning Prayer, Right To. Please stand as you are able. O God, make speed to save us. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Alleluia. Let us say Psalm 121 together in unison. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where is my help to come? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved, and he who watches over you will not fall asleep. Behold, he who keeps watch over Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord himself watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun may not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Please be seated. The love of God has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given us. I was going to say some years ago, but it's more like some decades ago, when I was a student at General Seminary, we had the delightful privilege of hosting an unexpected visit by Henry Nouwen, the Roman Catholic priest and spiritual writer. This was early in 1996, so he actually went to be with God some months later. But it was such a joy to have that time with him in the chapel of the Good Shepherd. And what I remember even more than the words that he shared with us that evening were his curiosity and his joy. They just emanated from him. And furthermore, in addition to what he said, he did a series of somersaults down the aisle and then stood up so pleased and happy with himself. So what a wonderful example of a heart full of love of God, full of love of others. You may be familiar with the work that he did with his large communities and developmentally challenged adults and all kinds of things. So I often think back when I see that image of him doing his somersaults, which I couldn't even do then, I think of the curiosity and the joy that radiated from him. And especially during these past couple of years, during this time of COVID and of pandemic, during a time that has been filled with, for many of us, with loss within our congregations, loss within our personal lives, COVID itself, and sadly, I'm one of the number. When I finally contracted COVID, it meant I couldn't be with my clergy sisters and brothers during the conference in September, so my heart was definitely saddened by that. But the anxiety and the grief that has existed, that has been palpable, that we have carried in so many different ways, individually and collectively. So I think about anxiety and grief in juxtaposition to what Henry Nouwen shared through his life and his ministry of curiosity and joy. And as we come together now, looking out at all of you, being here in person, I am seeing the glimmers of that curiosity and that joy come back. The heart of God encompasses it all. There's room in God's heart for the anxiety. There is room for the grief. And there is room for the curiosity and the joy that flows freely. Those were themes that I found reflected in what Bishop shared with us yesterday in terms of vision for our growth, for creating a fabulous place where God's love lives and thrives and blossoms and blooms. And as we think about the example of our dear Father Ted Howden, of Chaplain Howden, how he gave his all, his heart, he bonded with the heart of God to serve those who were entrusted to him. Bishop Hunt also said yesterday that looking around this space with our quantity of gifts, we nurture one another. And that is what it means to be church, to be diocese, to be coming together in this place where we offer it all up to God. God lovingly draws it into God's heart, and we share it with each other. And we look for those glimmers of hope. We look for that vision that's going to carry us into the future. There are two quotes that I keep in my church office. The first comes from Henry Nouwen. And this quote has encouraged me and buoyed me countless times when I felt I didn't know what I was doing next, or I didn't have enough to give, or I was just weary, as I felt so often during the pandemic. Henry Nouwen wrote, "The great mystery of ministry is that while we ourselves are overwhelmed by our own weaknesses and limitations, we can still be so transparent that the Spirit of God, the divine counselor, can shine through us and bring light to others." Amen, indeed. Thank you. And that comes from Henry, not from me. But yes, indeed, isn't that the mystery? Each of us, lay ordained, we all have gifts. We have been all called to be leadership within our congregations, within this diocese, in the world. And even when we don't feel we're up to the challenge, or when we're discouraged, or when we're just tired and wondering where we're going to get the strength and the energy from, that transparent love of God continues to flow through us and strengthen us and take us to the next step, bring us where we need to be, and allow God's light to shine through us, incomplete in our humanity, into the world beyond that is in such desperate need of receiving it. As we are approaching the season of Advent, which is just around the corner. I'm not quite prepared, but I don't know about you all. But it is coming. It's just a couple of weeks. And we think about these themes of light. We think about anticipation. I'd like to share with you the second quote that also is posted in my office right at eye level. And this comes from the novelist, the Episcopalian, Madeleine L'Engle. And if you did not know she was Episcopalian, she indeed was. She was actually the librarian in the Diocese of New York for a very long time at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. She addresses this idea of where does our hope come from? How do we move into what she calls the wild mystery of God's love? And this is what she says in the particular quote that I have displayed. "This is the irrational season when love blooms bright and wild. Had Mary been filled with reason, there'd have been no room for the child." So as we move forward with our business this afternoon, as we look ahead to this year and the years that are to come, I share these words of hope with you. I share my prayers for our diocese, for all that God is continuing to do, that God's light will shine through us just as we are. And we will continue to working with God bring the good news of God's kingdom to fruition here and beyond. Amen. Please stand. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Lord, hear our prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, send your Holy Spirit into our hearts to direct and rule us according to your will, to comfort us in all our afflictions, to defend us from all error, and to lead us into all truth through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. At this time, I invite you to offer your prayers, your thanksgivings to God, aloud or silently. We give you thanks, gracious God, for this assembled body and for the work and ministry to which you have called us and that you have equipped us to do in your name. Let us bless the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Welcome back, everybody. Now we are turning towards the business of this convention. Hope you had a wonderful lunch, and I want to thank the catering folks for feeding us. I also wanted to take a moment formally to thank Dean Christina Malden and all the wonderful volunteers here at the Cathedral of St. John who have been such wonderful hosts to us throughout this convention. Thank you. Two other brief announcements. The first one is, some of y'all have been so kind in noticing that I'm limping a little bit. I rolled my ankle earlier than the week. I don't even know how, but anyway, I'm fine. And after this event, my ankle will be up, elevated, and iced for quite some time, so don't worry. I'm fine. The second thing is that I'm pleased to announce that there is a gathering for clergy spouses at 1 p.m. today, which is about 45 minutes. The Reverend Meg Berkelhun, who I'm quite fond of, will be leading that gathering. Meg, are you here? I think she's on her way. Anyway, if you are a clergy spouse, you are more than welcome to attend, whether you were able to RSVP or not. But that gathering will be down the hall, up the stairs in the conference room, and Meg is looking forward to receiving you all. All right. With that, we turn it over to the Secretary of the Convention for some administrative and technical announcements.
Thank you, Bishop. Friends, I would remind you just to go through the dance that we danced last night. If you weren't with us, here are the steps. There is a QR code on the back of your agenda, as well as a link to dioceserg.org/convention. And here, give me just a moment. I've got too many screens. All right. So at drg.org/convention, which we will navigate to right now, or excuse me, dioceserg.org. Or using the QR code that is located on the back of your agenda, you will see a link to the electronic voting. Don't click that just yet. If you have a device that is capable of using cellular data, we would ask that you turn your Wi-Fi off. Do not connect to the Wi-Fi. Stay on your cellular data. If you have a device that needs to use the Wi-Fi, the DRG Convention Wi-Fi is there. The password is Rio Grande, all lowercase, no space, as seen on the back of your agenda. So what I'd like everybody to do is, if you're on cellular data, stay on cell data. If you're connected to Wi-Fi, hop on your browser, just pick a website. Let's give that a little bit of a workout. What we've got moving forward after the parliamentary procedures and procedural rule is another small test for us of the voting app. So when we return after the parliamentary procedures and procedural rule, we'll have another test run, but just go ahead, get connected. Those of you who need to connect to the Wi-Fi, do so. Those of you on cellular data, thank you for not connecting to the Wi-Fi. And we will have our test app launched shortly, or our test vote launched shortly following the procedural rule. Thank you, Bishop. Yes, sir. On the Wi-Fi? I will look into that right now, sir. Thank you.
Time the chair recognizes the parliamentarian for an update on parliamentary procedures. And you'll be pleased to know we have the whole updated Robert's Rules of Order right here. So we're in good hands, and he's actually got markings in it. So Judge, we're over in your hands, my friend.
Well, I have to mark it or I won't remember. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you again to another convention, the 70th, I believe, for the Diocese of Rio Grande. We're going to do something a little bit different on parliamentary procedure this time. We're going to start with a test. And I ask the clerks to pass out the exam. Oh, well. Never mind.
It was worth a try.
I thought so. I always liked pop quizzes when I was in school. I just want to remind you that parliamentary procedure is nothing more than a guidebook or a guide path for us to follow. It involves the consideration and remembering the most basic rules of human interaction so that we can engage in loving convening and listening. First of all, just a few basics again that we can't forget. The rights of the organization supersede the rights of the individual members. All members are equal and their rights are equal. The majority rules. Silence is consent. One question at a time, one speaker at a time. Debatable motions must receive full debate. Once a question is decided, it is not in order to bring the same motion or one essentially like it at the same meeting, and personal remarks and debate are always out of order. This group has historically, at least since I've been sitting up here, extremely vigilant in following these rules, and has always treated each and every one of us with respect. We ask that that continue. I wish for you a happy and orderly convention and a time of holy debate and listening. And then I believe now the Chancellor Pine from the state of Texas will talk about the procedural rule, which is an individual modification to the general rules that we usually follow.
Thank you. This is the wildly anticipated point in the convention that traditionally you get to hear a lawyer drone on and on for 15 minutes where I recite a long set of detailed rules on how we're going to govern debate and vote on things. We fixed that last year. As part of the canonical changes, we adopted, and I think Lee will put it on the screen, Canon 2, Section 2, actually contains what we traditionally had in the procedural rules. So we don't have to do a procedural rule this year. And more importantly, you don't have to hear me drone on for like 15 minutes, but you might for a minute or two. I have been asked just to remind people of a couple of key points. Not every convention we have elections to the General Convention. Although most elections are majority vote, those elections for delegates are plurality votes, and it just goes on who gets the most votes, and you just fill positions going down depending on the number of votes. So for that election, it's not majority vote, it's just plurality. Also, with the during the discussion, if you do speak at the microphone, please state your name, home, parish or mission, and the city, and they need that for some of the record keeping. In addition, you're limited to a reasonable time, generally not more than 4 minutes unless the presiding officer decides to allow you more time. And then a final thing, two things. First, speakers, they're expected to treat others with courtesy and respect, even when they're wrong, in your opinion. And in addition, limit outbursts from the crowd. You're expected not to make outbursts in crowds to speakers and comments to the speakers. And that's all I have, Your Honor. Bishop.
Thank you very much, Clyde. Okay. So before we get into the voting, we're going to have another test vote just to make sure. We tried a test vote last night, and you all participated very well. Thank you for that. That seemed to work. But of course, last night we weren't all in the same room at the same time using the same Wi-Fi and cellular service. So before we actually get into the voting, we're going to do one more test vote. And then following that, the order for the day will be, we will elect the people for the positions and deal with the nominations first. Then we will address the budget. Then we will address, then there'll be a time for Q&A with the chancellors about the constitutional and canonical changes, and then there'll be courtesy resolutions, and we'll be done for the day. So that's your basic layout. People first, we'll do the elections, then we will follow that with the budget conversation. Then there'll be a Q&A with the chancellors about the proposed canonical and constitutional changes, followed by courtesy resolutions. Are we ready, good Secretary?
Just a moment.
All right. In the moment, let me just take a point of personal privilege to thank the Reverend Kristen Cochran, our homilist for noon prayer. There she is. And also the chair of the standing committee. I want you all... The Standing Committee, as you know, serves two functions, basically. The Standing Committee is the group that serves as the council of advice to the bishop, and they also have their own independent role with respect to approving those who might be ordained, interviewing them and being a part of that process, and also they have a vote to consent or not to the election of every bishop in the Episcopal Church. And so the Standing Committee fills those functions, and then they are also the Board of Trustees, more or less. There's some other folks who are on the Board of Trustees, like the treasurer, but the Standing Committee also helps look after all the real property of the diocese. The chair of the Standing Committee also, if something should happen to the bishop, as some of you will remember, the Standing Committee becomes the ecclesiastical authority, at least in some things. The Standing Committee can't ordain people, for example, or attend the House of Bishops meetings, but they do look after the diocese if there's not a sitting bishop at the moment. And so because of that, it is my blessing to meet with the chair of the Standing Committee once a week in order to have a conversation about everything that's going on in the diocese. Sorry, this is a little bit, it's a little bit of a dark humor, but I call it the if I get hit by a bus conversation, so that there will be a smooth understanding with the chair of the Standing Committee of all the pastoral issues that we are working on, all of the things that are happening in congregations, etc. I also take time in that meeting to ask her advice every week about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And so I just want to thank you personally, Kristen. It has been a joy working with you. I'm grateful for your service. And as we come to the chair of the Standing Committee is elected immediately after this meeting. They will retire and elect the new Standing Committee chair. So as we come to the end of this term, I want to give thanks to you, Kristen, and for all that you are and all that you do. Thank you.
All right, friends. Thank you, Bishop. All right. Aware of that we may be facing some microphone. Oh, that was my fault. As are most things. So you will, are you all seeing a screen that says running elections on the TVs in front of you? Hey, that's a good sign for our network. All right, so we're gonna go through the DRG page, dioceserg.org/convention. You will click on the electronic voting option. You will see the currently running election. It should look like the screen you see on the TV where there is our Best Candy Test and our Best Candy Test 2. Is that showing up? All right, beautiful. You will click on the running ballot. Only ever click on the running ballot.
So go ahead and click on that running ballot now.
Running elections, rather. You will enter your voter ID and your voter key, which are found on the back of your name badge. If you have an issue, if you're having problems, we have 3 intrepid young people. Yes, Angel. There are folks roving the halls to offer help. If you need assistance, please raise your hand. Please raise your hand if you need assistance. Delegations who have folks who can offer assistance, please help those in your delegations. I want to be clear, you do not have to vote on your personal device. If you're having trouble connecting, If you're having trouble connecting, you can cast your vote on anyone's device as long as you use your voter ID and voter key. We already have 103 voters. We see some hands. Mandy, there's some hands in the back right there. Thank you, ma'am. Friends, we are all in this together. If you see somebody near you who needs help and you feel comfortable using a web browser, please offer that assistance. We don't. But what I'm going to do is, once we're done with this, all right, friends, do we have, if you wish to if you are wanting to cast a vote and have not yet, could you please raise your hand? Okay, we've got just a couple more, we've got time to work this out. We're in this together.
Does anybody else still need help up here? Anybody?
One of the things we're trying to do here, friends, so just as a note, we know that there are many who registered as delegates who, for many reasons, were unable to attend. What we're attempting to do right now is establish a baseline number for the total voters in the room. So as of right now, 73% of registered delegates have cast a vote, totaling 157 votes. Now, that is of the share of registered delegates. So we want to make sure we know how many people with a voting login are here in the room hoping to cast a vote. So if you have not yet cast a vote, would you please raise your hand? Hey, David, we've got two in the back there, please. I appreciate your patience with this, y'all. It is more fun to be doing this part of it together because we have folks who can actually provide hands-on help instead of me having to provide phone tech support over Zoom. which is much less fun than this right now.
And it's also much better than Scantron. So once we all figure out how to do this and get comfortable with it, this is going to go much quicker. So it's good for us to take the time to make sure that everybody's vote can be counted. The chair
Personal
recognizes
privilege?
the Reverend Michael Drinkwater.
Yeah. So I have my book of convention jokes.
Very good, very good.
But they're only guaranteed fresh today, so they're best by tomorrow. So, all right. What do you get when you cross a parrot and a centipede? A walkie-talkie.
I love it. I love it. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. One of the things we grew to love about the Zoom convention was the ongoing chat conversation, which was mostly dominated by jokes such as that one. And we missed that. So thank you, Dr. Drinkwater. We are blessed to have you with us, and the jokes will keep coming at opportune moments during the afternoon in order to keep us in a appropriate state of mind. Absolutely.
While we are waiting on and making sure we have everybody cast a successful test vote, I do want to go ahead and take this time to make mention of some of the highlights of the procedural rule in Section 2, which can be found on the canons on the diocesan webpage. This particularly affects our General Convention deputy elections this year. We changed in the canon last year that a plurality of votes is sufficient for an election. And for positions in which there are multiple year terms, the highest vote getter gets the longest term. Now, there was some debate as to whether or not that's the way it should work, but that's the way it does work. The highest vote getter gets the longest term. In the case of General Convention deputies, we elect 4 deputies and 2 alternates in the clergy and in the lay orders. In the case of our laity this year, we will be determining which 4 of the 5 names are serving as the deputies and which person will be serving as the alternate, with the highest 4 vote getters serving as your deputy and the lowest vote getter in the lay order serving as your alternate. Likewise, in the clergy, we have 7 candidates, 4 delegates, and a first and second alternate, meaning that the highest 4 vote earners will be the delegates, the 5th highest vote earner will be our first alternate, and the 2nd highest vote earner will be our second alternate. In the cathedral chapter, standing committee elections, both in the clergy and the lay orders, the 2 highest vote getters will both serve a term, with the highest vote getter serving the longest term. So, has everybody who wishes to cast a ballot and has registered had the opportunity to cast their ballot? Let me see a hand if you have not. We did it, y'all. All right, that is 79% of registered delegates for 170 votes.
All right. So,
Oh,
right, which candy is best? That's
right,
the,
now you actually want to know the answer.
we do.
Give me just a moment here. All right, friends, our first election is closed. And I'm waiting for the results to show up now. Consistent with last night's result, 39% of the body prefers Reese's peanut butter cups. With Snickers receiving the second highest percentage of the vote at 36%. M&Ms, by which I meant plain M&Ms, I should have specified, receiving 21% of the vote. And Skittles, you non-chocolate containing blessed folks, 4% of the vote. So, using this example, Reese's peanut butter cups would serve the longest term of office. Long may they reign. And friends, that brings us to the nominating report.
I hear the job will leave them alive.
Judge, what's the procedure for censuring a delegate? Friends, I will bring your attention again to our dioceserg.org/convention page. If you scroll down to the nominations, there are regular and floor nominations by position. And we now move to the nomination report. Just as a point of clarification, all those names received before the canonical deadline are, by virtue of being received by the nominations committee and submitted by the nominations committee, officially on the ballot. We will need to make a motion to receive the floor nominations at the conclusion of the nomination report. So beginning with our General Convention deputies and the clergy orders, we have Arthur Raymond Rainey III, Daniel Eugene Cave, Fred McKelder Brown, Christina Ann Malden, James Mark Goodman for regular nominations. Floor nominations, General Convention deputies, clergy, Jeremiah Griffin, Michael Coburn, and Kristen Copran. I think we're hugging the network. There we go. Friends, as I have noticed, the nomination position file is a relatively large one. If you're having trouble pulling it up, please keep refreshing. Yep. No. All right, General Convention Deputy and the lay General Convention Deputy. Regular nomination from Catherine Elizabeth Bailey. Floor nominations are Mark Edward Childers, Paula V. Moat, Catherine Ellen Varney, Diane Ponter Butler. For the Cathedral Chapter, these are all floor nominations. Cecilia Ann Main, Michael Coburn, and Lucas Michael Grubbs. For the Commission on Ministry of the Baptized, there's a floor nomination for Catherine Ellen Varney. For the Diocesan Council, clergy, for a 2-year term, a floor nomination for Michael Gary Wallens. Diocesan Council, lay member, 2-year term, there is a floor nomination for Jerry Allen Walker. Disciplinary Board, clergy, for a 4-year term, there is a floor nomination for Michael Coburn. Disciplinary Board, lay, 4-year term, there is a floor nomination for Catherine Ellen Varney. Standing Committee, clergy, there is a floor nomination for Jan Hosea, a floor nomination for Kathleen McNellis, and a floor nomination for Cynthia A. Lowe's. Standing Committee, lay, there is a floor nomination for Patricia Seifert, a floor nomination for Kevin Jerome Daly, and a floor nomination for Joe Lane. Yes, sir. So, Bishop, a motion would be in order to receive the floor nominations as presented by the nominating report.
We have the motion and a second. The motion is to receive all of the floor nominations. Is there discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please raise your hand if you are interested in having all the floor nominations on the ballot. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. And so we now move on to the actual voting. But before we do that, the chair would like to entertain a motion of unanimous consent.
The names. What do you mean? Unanimous consent for the
Yes. The chair now calls for a motion of unanimous consent to elect those running in uncontested elections. There's a motion. I see the second. So is there discussion on whether or not to elect all of those in uncontested races? Seeing and hearing none, please raise your hand if you would like to elect all of those in uncontested races. Very good. Thank you. Any opposed? The motion carries. And congratulations to all of you who ran. Thank you.
Just about.
All right, what's going to happen next is we're going to vote on the contested elections. And due to the beauty of electing by plurality, for each election you will have the choice of choosing your top candidate, and the top vote getter, as the canon described, will all come through. Am I correct about that? So you're only voting for your top candidate.
Yes, you are voting in every election for your preferred candidate. One choice. As long as the orders will, we will determine the order and who gets the longest term for the standing committee positions and for the cathedral chapter positions. For the General Convention deputies, the top 4 vote getters will serve as your deputies, with the alternates, first and second alternate, being determined in position 5 and 6. You select your preferred candidate. In the event of a tie, we will move to a second ballot. So, in just one moment, it's showing me that it takes about a minute to get us up and ready to go. Let me make sure that we are all set on. We're hugging it. All right. So if you see This where it looks first ballot for election to office, where it says scheduled. Keep refreshing, it will show up eventually. Is everybody seeing the election is scheduled to start? All right. Give me just one moment here, y'all. Yeah, we will. I have the election as loaded. Is everybody seeing? Refresh if you still see it as scheduled, refresh your page. Yeah, there's a little bit of lag time. Yeah, we are showing that the election is open and receiving votes. Yeah, it just takes, we're going live. It'll take a minute or two. You will have to input your voter ID and voter key with every ballot. That is the only way we can maintain security for each ballot. The ballot is for all of the uncontested offices. Oh, all of the contested, excuse me. It is all being done on one ballot. So you should see candidates for General Convention Deputy in the clergy order and in the lay orders. For Cathedral Chapter and for Standing Committee, both clergy and lay. You are able to leave your selection blank. You can abstain from a vote. And please make sure you have your hand raised if you need assistance.
Michael Drinkwater, St. John's, Alamogordo.
Recognizes the Reverend Michael Drinkwater.
Why did the policeman ticket the ghost on Halloween?
Why did the policeman ticket the ghost on Halloween, Father?
He didn't have a haunting license.
The chair recognizes the Reverend Jill Klein. Please raise your hand if you are looking for technical assistance.
Father Drinkwater, Sydney has sent me some jokes for you from Hawaii. That's why she's not here. She would like to know, why is it so cheap to throw a party at a haunted house?
I don't know why, Sydney.
Because the ghosts bring all the booze.
We miss Sydney. We are grateful for the good Father Drinkwater to be with us. But for those of you that weren't a part of the online conventions, there was a running sort of duel of humor and levity between Michael Drinkwater and Sydney. So, Sydney, we hope you're having fun. If you're watching this from Hawaii, I'm sure.
It does tickle me to no end that in some years' time, historians will be looking back to see how the church responded to the pandemic. And they'll be looking at the journals of this very convention. And Father Michael Drinkwater will seem a very prominent figure in the records of those conventions.
Yes,
I have a
please.
joke for you. How do you get 5 elephants in a Volkswagen? Oh, five elephants and a bowl of Jell-O in a Volkswagen.
Don't know. How do you get?
You
a bowl
put
of
2
Jell-O
elephants
and
in the
5
front
elephants?
and 3 elephants in the back, and there's always room for Jell-O.
Thank you, thank you. I love the Diocese of the Rio Grande. Can I just say that?
Friends, if you have not yet had the opportunity to cast your ballot, please raise your hand. Okay. If you are having trouble logging into the ballot, please raise your hand. Wonderful.
Yes, if you're looking for assistance, please raise your hand, and there are still folks coming around. Mandy, could we have some help over here? Yes, please.
Carol McGowan Cathedral. I have a question about our voting procedure. My understanding is if there were 4 positions to be voted on, we would be having 4 votes, but instead we're having 1 vote for four positions, specifically General Convention deputies. This is a total change from what we've done before, and I think there's been some confusion amongst voters. So could someone explain a little bit more about why we have changed from plurality with 4 votes to plurality with 1 vote?
Clyde, could you speak to that, sir? There was why we went to a plurality with only 1 choice instead of a plurality of 4.
Trying to remember back from that was one of the things last year that came up. And actually, it may have been, I seem to recall that at a past convention, we had the majority vote, and we had to have lots and lots of votes because we had a majority for those positions. And we went through many rounds of votes. Back in the Scantron days, that meant a lot of extra delay each time because it would take 30 minutes, each time you voted. And I believe that's why we went to plurality in terms of the General Convention delegates, as I recall. And I don't know if Canon Perko or Karen may recall different. Okay. That's my recollection.
Carol McGowan Cathedral.
Yes.
I guess the issue's not plurality. It is if we have 4 positions, we're only have 1 vote for 4 positions. If we only had 1 position and 1 vote, that would make sense. But each General Convention, there are 4 General Convention deputies being voted on. We have more than that nominated.
What you're asking for is essentially, I believe, what would be legal term be cumulative voting, where you might have 4 votes for 4 positions.
Well, essentially, that's what we've done at other conventions. Is the top 4 vote getters are are elected. And then the next one down is the first alternate is elected. And I don't think those went through a lot of
Right. Carol,
votes.
the issue was actually, the way the previous canon was construed, the issue was the plurality. We had to have a vote get or receive
Right.
a majority. And with the plurality this time around, the way we have it phrased this time, that plurality is sufficient. Prior, we had to do those multiple runoffs on Zoom in
Right.
years past to.
I don't have any issue with the plurality vote. I have an issue and a confusion that if we have 4 positions but only 1 vote, then I think that skews our voting.
There would be, provided, I understand the concern. I think the change there that we would need to make, Clyde, is to provide for what would be either a plural voting or a ranked choice vote. We could have a ballot. It would need to be a little bit later in the day, specifically for general convention deputies, based on that ranked choice.
Yeah, we could actually
with
adopt
that-
a procedural rule for that to.
Yes, we could propose a procedural rule for that, Clyde. That is correct.
I agree. And it would probably be maybe a rank, you'd have to, part of the thing, it's a technical aspect of it. I believe Canon Curtis would have to check into on which way to doing it. Because what you'd want to avoid is the system, because it may not log in if you had, 4 votes. The cumulative voting thing for a legal thing is someone could put all 4 votes on one person, and I think that's what we're trying to avoid as well. You're trying to do so, but I think it's technically you could probably get around that.
Before we continue this conversation, we have received 170 votes, meaning that everybody who intends to cast a ballot has cast one. No?
I'm still reading the floor nominations, thank you.
All right. So, what I would propose, which would seem a sensible solution, is that when this ballot does close, that we accept the elections, that we only announce the elections for the for the positions that are not general convention deputy. And then if it is the mind of the convention, we can launch a ballot a little bit later in the proceedings with a ranked choice vote specifically for the general convention deputies.
I believe that would be the way to handle it. That way you would not, those votes for general convention delegates would not be announced and would not be accepted and Mr. Ken Perko has.
Yeah, Bishop, we should, yes, the chair recognizes the canonist.
Procedurally.
Would you please step to the microphone?
I'm sorry. Procedurally, though, I would suggest that we vote prior to anything being announced on whether we want to maintain the current situation or go to the other, because I have no sense whether it is the sense of this body or not that we should go towards a manner of voting other than the one that we've already done. So I would respectfully suggest that we first of all vote on whether we want to make a change vis-a-vis the deputies to General Convention, and then one way or another proceed from that point.
Yes, sir.
Well, we'd have to close this first.
Robert Mundy, St. Matthews, Los Lunas. So what I stand to is a point of fairness, which I believe Robert's Rules of Order that's a fundamental basis for Robert's Rules of Order. You have 4 positions. We elect under this current system. My favorite one, oh look, he got elected, but my second favorite, my third favorite, my fourth favorite, I didn't get to vote for. So it's not fair. It used to be, I used to be able to vote for 4 people that I really wanted to go. I'm voting for 4 people. Now I'm only voting for 1, and that's not fair. So that's my point. And so I would definitely follow with Ken and Perko's suggestion.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, Lucy Singular, St. Mark's on the Mesa. I would like to make a motion that we do the ranked voting for 4 people.
Thank you. Is there a second? There is a second. Is there discussion? Hearing and seeing none, what we will need to do, oh, yes, making your way to the microphone.
What we need to do is make a motion to...
Bill Stone, Epiphany Socorro. I don't think that ranked choice is what we were talking about before. Ranked choice is you give ranked 1, 2, 3, 4. We were just talking about a multiple vote ballot. And I'm not sure what the correct technical term is, but it's not ranked choice.
We can accommodate that, sir. Yes, what I would ask for in terms of clarifying the motion is that we acknowledge that the convention acknowledges the results of the ballot that is currently open for all positions except for general convention deputies. No. Told you. This would only... The secretary would like to ask a question of Cannon McGowan, if that is in order. Cannon, if you would refresh my memory, because at every convention since I have been your secretary, we've had to do, well, the ones where we've elected the convention deputies, we've had to do these votings by runoff on individual choice votes given the Zoom platform.
Oh, okay.
Given the Zoom platform, that was how we had to run this when it was on Zoom. Now that we're in person and we have the ability to go back.
Well, but we haven't done a general convention election on Zoom. Because the last general convention election would have been 4 years.
If you would please remind the body the way that those elections were conducted prior to.
We had 4 votes for the clergy order because we had 4 positions, and we had 4 votes for the lay order. And the people who had the 4 highest number of votes of those 4 votes were elected.
And that process only applied to general convention deputies?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So it would then seem to be in order, if it is the mind of the convention, to void the election of the general convention deputies on this ballot and accept the results of every other election on this ballot, given the current voting method, with the idea that we will return to a 4-vote, to a ballot where you are able to cast 4 votes for your general convention deputies before the close of business today.
4 votes for each order.
4 votes each, yeah, in each order.
There is a motion already on the floor in order to allow you to vote for 4 people for the lay order and 4 people for the clerical order. We're in the place of discussing that motion on the floor. I see, yep. Are you approaching the microphone?
Christopher McLaren, St. Mark's. I call the question.
Thank you. Are we able to do this by shall we? So the motion on the floor is that we scrap this current vote for General Convention, and that we have another ballot in which each of you will be allowed to vote for 4 people in the clergy order and 4 people in the lay order. That's the motion that is on the floor.
And I think also as well, all of the other elections, this ballot for all the other elections will be accepted. So, for others?
No, there are 2 motions.
The motion on the floor is one motion, and it is only to void the General Convention. We're only talking about the General Convention vote so far.
Point of order.
Yes?
Robert Mundy, St. Matthews. The question has been called, so we're just ending the discussion.
We're not discussing this anymore, Robert. I'm explaining
We're
what
voting
we're doing.
to stop the discussion.
I'm restating the motion before we vote. That's what we're doing right now.
The question calls for stopping the discussion.
There is no further discussion.
The question was called.
Exactly. Father Mundi, the question has been called. There is no more debate. I am restating the motion before we vote. That is all that is happening right now.
Yes, sir, I understand, but in Robert's Rules of Order, when we call the question, we vote as to whether or not we want to stop the discussion or not, then we go to vote on the motion.
The parliamentarian has ruled that the debate has been closed and that it is in order for the chair to restate the motion, and we will vote on it. So the motion that is on the floor is that we discard the votes for General Convention deputy, and that we will have another vote in which each of you may vote for 4 people for the clerical order and 4 people for the lay order. That's the motion on the floor.
Second.
All those in favor signify by raising your hands. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. Now there is a second matter which we need to discuss, which is what do we do about the rest of this ballot and the other positions?
Raymond Redding, Trinity on the Hill, Los Alamos. I make a motion that we accept the other ballots as valid.
Thank you. There's a motion that has been seconded. The chair would like to take a point of order in order to remind the body that the Standing Committee lay order ballot also included 2 positions for which you only voted for 1 person. Yes, sir.
Christopher McLaren, St. Mark's. It also includes 2 positions for clergy as well. So
yes,
the methodology we're talking about should apply to that office as well. It seems like to me, in the past it has. We're talking about the past. As a body, we adopted before we began a particular procedure. We actually haven't undone that procedure for the entire vote. So we would need to consider this other office as well, or all offices that have multiple positions open, and how we're going to do that. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, so the current motion that is on the floor is that we accept all of the rest of the ballot that you just made. Further discussion?
Bishop, given the given the complication, Bishop, I recommend voiding the entirety of the ballot. And if you can give the secretary.
The parliamentarian has ruled that the chair can void the whole thing, so it's over. The chair would like to offer that the body take a 15-minute break. Let's reconvene at 1:30 p.m. and we'll have ballots for you then. Thank you all for your patience. Welcome back, everybody. All right. Our goal continues to be our mutual flourishing. And so the chair wants to thank you for your participation in this process. We want to make it as good and fair and appropriate a conversation and decision-making process that we can. And so thank you for your vigorous participation. It's greatly appreciated. So we've reworked the ballot, and in just a moment, the secretary will explain what you will see as you open up your ballot. All of the positions are on this ballot as well. But as we discussed in this ballot, if there are 4 slots open, you will be able to vote for 4 people. Okay? There is one exception to that. There are 3. No, because we were waiting for 2 standing. Right. In the position of cathedral chapter, there are 3 positions and there are 3 people. We already know that everybody's going to get elected. Right? 3 spots, 3 people. We already know everybody's going to be elected. What we are trying to determine on that ballot for cathedral chapter is who gets the longer terms. So if everybody votes for all 3 people, we won't know who gets, right? So for cathedral chapter, even though everybody's going to get elected, you're going to get to choose 2 of the 3, and that will allow us to determine who gets the longer term. Does that make sense? Okay. So I now recognize the secretary to walk you through the ballot, but I wanted you to understand why you can only vote for 2 when there's 3 slots. It's because there's 3 people running. Yes, Mr. Secretary.
All right, you should see on the election runner page, first ballot for election to office. You will not see the previous ballot because it was deleted. For General Convention Deputy, both clergy and lay, select up to 4 options. Up to 4. You may select less than 4, but up to 4. In the General Convention Deputy for both clergy and lay. Cathedral chapter, as the bishop just explained, though there are 3 open positions, select 2 to determine who will receive the longer terms. Standing committee for the clergy, there is a 3-year term and a 2-year term. You may select 2 of the candidates. For standing committee clergy, with the highest vote getter receiving the longer term. For standing committee lay, there are 3 candidates for 2 positions. Select 2 of the candidates with the higher vote earner receiving the longer term. Please, if you are having technical issues, please raise your hand. We have folks in the room to assist you. We have received over half of the vote of the body. If you are still having technical issues, please raise your hand. Mandy, or who else do we have? David, are you still in the room, sir? We need some assistance down front. Okay. If you need technical assistance, please raise your hand and leave it raised.
The chair recognizes the Reverend Michael Drinkwater largely because of the sport coat.
Thank you. It was to win an ugly Christmas sweater competition. Yes. What is a ghost's favorite play? I wrote a lot of these around Halloween time. Sorry.
What is a ghost's favorite play?
Romeo and Juliet.
That's a fail.
All right, friends, we are still receiving, we're down to the last few votes. If you are having technical issues and need assistance, please raise your hand. If your vote is still outstanding, would you please show your hand? Thank you. We'll give just another couple minutes then. All right, friends, this election has been open for 10 minutes. Is there anyone who needs additional time? Yes, ma'am.
All right, my friends, has everybody cast their vote? Is there anybody else who needs more time to cast their vote? All right, everybody feel better? Yay, good, good, good. And the chair wishes to thank the secretary for some quick footwork. Thank you.
All right, friends, our first ballot for election to office is now closed. And I will move to announcing the results of the election. Remember, a plurality is sufficient, with the top 4 vote getters for our General Convention deputies serving as deputies, and the others, the numerical alternates. I was incorrect earlier. We do have space for up to 4 alternates. So everybody receives a position. It is just a question as to which. So our election results are, for General Convention Deputy, Clergy, our deputies are Kristen Copran, Christina Ann Malden, Daniel Eugene Cave, and Arthur Raymond Rainey. Our first alternate is Mac Brown, second Jeremiah Griffin, followed by Michael Coburn and Mark Goodman. In the lay order, our deputies, are Kathy Bailey, Mark Childers, Diane Butler, and Paula Moat, with Kathy Varney serving as first alternate. For Cathedral Chapter, Michael Coburn receives a 3-year term, Cecilia Main receives a 2-year term, Lucas Grubbs receiving a 1-year term. For Standing Committee, Clergy, the 3-year term, Jan Hosea receives a 3-year term, Kathy McNallis receives a 2-year term. For Standing Committee Lay, Patricia Seifert receives a 3-year term, and Kevin Daly receives a 1-year term. There will not be a need for another ballot.
And thank you for all of you who were willing to run, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you. All right, the next order of business is for us to vote on the budget. And so the chair recognizes the treasurer to introduce the budget and move it.
So with the proposed budget for 2023 being presented yesterday, I move that this convention accept the budget.
I hear the motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Raymond Rainey, Trinity on the Hill, Los Alamos.
Yes, sir.
During the discussion of the budget, it was suggested that in keeping with what General Convention did for the bishop in allowing an allowance outside of the asking assessment, that would Bishop consider taking to Diocesan Council the consideration of a percentage, creating a percentage allotment that would be an exception for payment of fair share for priests who are rectors, vicars, or priests in charge.
Thank you. Having consulted with the parliamentarian, as I am both the chair of convention and the chair of Diocesan Council, and Canon Rainey, I'm happy to bring that proposal to the council directly.
Christopher McLaren, St. Mark's, Albuquerque. I like your budget very much. there's something I don't like about it, and that is I don't believe that the cost of living increase for the diocesan staff is significant enough. And I don't know how to change that. That kind of financial wizardry will need to be left to others. But I don't feel like we're doing the right thing by not keeping up with the cost of living increase that even the federal government has said is realistic for their programs. And I know it's a revenue issue, but I think that we need to fix it or figure out some way to solve it. Because I don't think I don't think our diocesan staff should be bearing that burden on their shoulders of having less money for the next year. And I'm sure we're going to ask them to work harder. Thanks.
Christopher, thank you. That I have that same concern, and I shared, I think, that a bit last night. And so I'd be open to hearing how we might be able to adjust the budget for 2023 in order to meet that.
Michael Drinkwater, St. John's, Alamogordo. This is not a joke. My first convention in this diocese was in 2012, and I addressed that convention about the ask for the national church. And so I just want to commend this bishop and everyone who worked on the budget I've been asking for that full ask for 10 years, and it's just good to see. So, thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Alex Linzo, St. Francis Rio Rancho. Might we draw more from our endowed funds in order to keep up with cost of living increases? Doesn't seem to me that we should save to do justice tomorrow if we're not doing it today. So, if we're allowed.
Yeah. So, in regards to our invested funds, the endowment fund, if I recall, has language in that limits the withdrawal rate there. The Wellspring Fund, currently the language in that governing document for that fund allows us to draw up to 5% of the year-end average. We've been trying to move to spread that out in terms of taking an average of the previous 3 years just to help to smooth some of the volatility that happens in any one calendar year. And then maybe the third process or fund that we could look at is the Bosque Center Proceeds Fund. Currently, the trustees are trying to determine how that fund should be set up, or if it should just be added to one of our current invested funds, like the endowment fund. One of the things that's a challenge when we look at invested funds is that as members of this convention, as the trustees look at our invested funds, we actually have a fiduciary duty to balance the needs of the current beneficiaries, that's us who are doing the work of the church today, with that of the future beneficiaries of these funds that will be carrying out the work of the church in the future. So to increase a draw on investment funds means that we may be favoring the current beneficiaries versus the future beneficiaries. And there may be good reasons for that. You know, if in times of crisis that may be called for, but we need to act prudently in that if we were to increase the draw on invested funds to support an operating expense that ends up being a permanent expense, you know, it's not just a one-time increase and then salaries go down. We're permanently kind of increasing part of our operating budget, and arguably the largest part of our operating budget being about just almost a half of the diocesan budget. But that is something that we can discuss.
Erica Rozalski, Our Lady in the Valley. with the proceeds and not knowing what we're doing with them, and the estimated cost of it being like 500,000, somewhere around there, you were saying, it seems like a reasonable draw of 4% from that fund would be 80,000 a year. Is that part of thinking about where the additional COLA could come from?
Yeah, so for the Bosque, those funds that were the 2.7, almost $2.8 million that were drawn from it, about 425,000 was used to help build out the space here at the diocese, or the cathedral for the diocesan offices. So that brings that value of those proceeds to about 2.2 million. So that 4% draw, that's where that 115 or 116,000 is coming from. That's currently in the budget. It is at 4%. Again, we could increase that, but that means that we would be introducing a permanent increase in expenses with no guarantee that the invested funds will be able to keep up with that rate of withdrawal. So I would be cautious to rely solely on the invested funds to fix any type of deficit. I mean, it's because we have a fiduciary duty to balance the needs of what's happening today versus what may be happening in the future.
Is there further discussion?
But you're the delegates, you get to help say something, so.
The chair would like to take a moment just to remind the body that the budget that we pass here is our best guess as of today about what the needs of the diocese will be, and that in between conventions, it is the diocesan council that can adjust the budget based on the real situation on the ground. And so the diocesan council could take this up and look at it again in order to try to figure out how we could do better for our staff by cutting some other things, just as a point of reminding that what we do today isn't
set in stone,
unamendable. It's the council that can adjust the budget.
Thank you, Bishop.
Yes.
Dick Steele, St. Chad's. How much are we paying right now in Social Security, et cetera, for the staff?
So we do pay the 7.65%, the employer portion, and we also reimburse our clergy employees, so the bishop and canon, 1/2 of their self-employment tax, which is equal to the 7.65%.
So if we went up, how much are you recommending, or is it recommended that we go up? How much total give the staff what they really deserve?
Are you asking what the dollar amount would look like if we were to go to that 8.7 or 9% or so? I think when we talked about it in council in October, I think it was around $35,000 to $36,000.
So we have the funds from the Bosque sale, which are now $2 million plus. And so $30,000 is there, and 30,000 is 30,000. I'm not belittling it, but can the delegates recommend to the diocesan council that that money be transferred this year, and then we figure out a way to raise the 30,000 without having to go into the fund? Is that possible to do? So that you get a vote from the convention, not like over to you guys. Have a good day. In other words, we request that our staff be provided with a proper reimbursement for their work. You follow me?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure what maybe I'm missing what you're saying. So part of the budget does include a draw off of those funds from the sale of Bosque Center.
Okay.
The draw amount that's proposed in 2023 is almost 116,000. So that is part of the revenue piece for the diocese.
So that would go up to 146,000 if we asked for the 30.
Yes, so we would, in essence, be looking to draw maybe closer to 5 or a little bit more than 5% off those funds.
Okay.
And again, on a short term, that may be okay.
Well,
but what
yes.
happens, drawing 5% or more off of invested funds starts to increase or to kind of eat away at your principal.
I agree, but if we did it this year with the object of next year putting it into the budget at the amount, that we then refigure the budget. I mean, unfortunately, if you're going to take care of your employee who is doing a very good job, but we aren't paying them what we should be paying, then we might lose them.
Yeah,
So I guess in other words, $30,000 in the big picture is not that big. If it was $300,000, granted.
Right.
I think we could probably find $30,000 next year.
Okay.
Okay? So can I make a motion?
We are currently discussing the motion that is on the floor, and
We-
so this is discussion for that.
Can I amend that motion?
No, we can't amend that motion at the moment.
Okay, so I could make the motion later after we decide. Okay, thank you.
I'm Kathleen Pittman, St. Andrews, Roswell. During this whole time that I was on standing committee and council for the past like 6 years, we struggled. And we have the opportunity to be clean with this. One of the hesitancies that people in this diocese thought about selling our Bosque Center and Camp Stony was that in prior times when we had property to sell, we spent the money, we spent the principal, salaries, and I love our diocesan staff. My goodness, I would love to give them $1 million apiece every year because they do the work. However, when we're talking about salaries, we're not talking about $30,000. We're talking about $30,000, $30,000 plus cost of living the next year, et cetera, et cetera. This is, in my opinion, is not good stewardship of our money, of the money that the proceeds we've been getting from like the Bosque Center.
Thank you. Yes.
Kathy Bailey from St. Michael and All Angels, Vice Chair of Diocesan Council. I would just like to say, JP, thank you for explaining this so well, that this has been a discussion in the last 4 Diocesan Council meetings. We are very much aware of COLA and wanting to give our staff their cost of living adjustments. What we have been trying desperately to do is to work within council, which is the convention between conventions, to look at the budget in discernment, in prayer, and in conversation around how to support staff. That conversation, I know, as I step off of council, will continue. and that this is in the forefront of council's mind to support diocesan staff the best way that we can as a diocese. I would ask this body to think through how we do stewardship within our own parishes and how we are supporting the diocesan budget that will support our diocesan staff. It is all of our responsibilities to be stewards to one another and to tend the garden around the trees that we grow. And that includes our diocesan staff.
Thank you, Kathy. So, as Kathy mentioned, this has been a point of conversation in Diocesan Council since we first started to work on the budget back in April, and I guess it was April when we first really started having a conversation. Because even then we were seeing signs of the increase in cost of living and inflation, and seeing signs of that it was less transitory than what may have been imagined last year. And Kathy, you're correct. I think council will continue to have this discussion. There are ways. I mean, as the bishop mentioned, this budget isn't written in stone. We can make adjustments throughout the year as needed. And I'm certainly happy as the treasurer to make sure that the first priority of any adjustments be an eye to keeping our staff competitively paid, or at least paid, in considering the cost of living changes, as I say, as a priority item for next year. As we go through and as we make adjustments to that budget, I guess I should say, is as we make adjustments to the budget, the first thought will be toward how do we continue to free up some money within the budget and reallocate that to diocesan staff salaries. I do want to make a comment in that, and just to show the action that the council did that I think serves as an example. When we learned in General Convention that exemption amount was changing from $140,000 to $200,000, the first thought was it's just going to be added to the staff salaries. I think the budget that may have been presented at the roadshows, we were just looking at a cost of living adjustment of 3 or 3.5%, and now you see it's at 4%. So you see that small, $9,000 change in the budget means a 0.5% increase in the cost of living for our staff.
Christopher McLean, St. Mark's. I really appreciate the conversation, and I brought up the question just because I think we all need to know that this is a priority for the council and for those in the budgeting. I think it's very difficult to fix problems like this at a convention from the floor. And I realized that I just wanted to know what people were thinking and the reasoning behind it. I also fully support protecting that corpus of the funds from the sale of the Bosque Center, because we've been down a very different road than that in the past, and we don't want to go there again. Suffice it to say, we appreciate our diocesan staff, and we want them as well paid as possible. We appreciate every sacrifice that's being made to do that. And I call the question.
The question has been called. There has been a second. We now vote on the call of the question. Are you ready to end debate? Please raise your hand if you're ready to end debate. Thank you. Any opposed to ending debate? All right, the question has successfully been called. And as we move now to vote on it, the chair would like to take a moment to thank you for this discussion and to let you know that as the chair of Diocesan Council, I'll be taking 3 things from this discussion to the next meeting of council as we work together in beginning the next year. The first thing will be a discussion about whether it's possible for us to exempt a percentage of the congregational fair share in order to reduce the burden on the congregations. And I note that that would also drop the total diocesan budget. I will also be bringing to council your request that we consider meeting the full COLA expectation for the staff, which of course would not just be for this year, but would go on every year after that. In terms of this, this increase this year would then be carried forward. And the third thing that I want to just thank you for is for your care and concern for the diocesan staff. It's my pleasure to work with them every single day, and your support for them and your willingness to express that support and concern is deeply appreciated. So I'll be sharing that with the council as well. And now we vote on the budget as it has been presented.
All right, friends, the ballot for accepting, the ballot to accept the 2023 budget as presented is available on the election runner page. You know the drill, just keep hitting refresh until it comes up. When you arrive on the page, you are looking at the 2023 budget approval. Please, as always, if you need technical assistance, raise your hand and leave it raised. We're getting it. Practice makes perfect, y'all. Thank you so much. If you, Angel, down front here on the right. We have folks who are in need of some technical assistance.
The chair recognizes Father Drinkwater.
Excellent. Why don't mummies take time off?
I don't know, Father. Why don't mummies take time off?
They're afraid to unwind.
That one's my favorite so far, Father. That was good. And this is original material, is it not? I have deep respect.
All right, friends. If you need technical support, please raise your hand and keep it raised. Do we have any votes outstanding in the room? Yep. Well. I love it when everything works out. All right.
Okay, anybody? All right, we're still waiting on one. It's important for us. We want to make sure that everybody's vote counts. We want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard.
Is there anyone who is still not yet? Yep, we got you. Is there anyone who is not the Reverend Nancy Antrim? Who has not?
There's a couple. It's all good.
All right. This is a fabulous opportunity to mention that the Reverend Nancy Antrim recently had her ministry as the Vicar of Hobbs celebrated. We are hugely grateful for her work. And friends, during these times, we will have I believe, 2 more ballots that we have scheduled for today. And as we are waiting, feel free to move about the cabin, as it were, and for the duration of any of the business.
All right, is anybody else waiting to vote? All right, Mr. Secretary, what's the result of the vote?
All right, friends, our election is now closed. The interface is not very clean, Jay, but I mean, I'm very happy to. The budget, is it showing on the screens? All right, the budget has been approved.
Thank you all.
98.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you all.
The chair now calls upon our chancellor from the state of Texas, Mr. Clyde Pine, to have a discussion. He'll be introducing the canonical and constitutional changes, and we'll have some chance for some question and answer about those changes.
Thank you, Bishop. I think we actually did the introduction yesterday, so we can probably start with the Q&A. And I'll also have Canon Michael Perko as well as Karen Aubrey available as well to clean up whatever I mess up. I did have one thing to bring up in advance. Someone had brought up a question with me earlier today. Some of you may ask, wait, if we approve all these changes, we've got to amend our parish or mission bylaws? And technically, no, you don't need to do so. Under Canon 13.4, all the bylaws are subject to the canons, Constitution, and incorporate them by reference. So if we change the canons, you don't have to make changes in your bylaws. So the short answer is no. But I'm a lawyer, and I just can't give a short answer. So it's probably helpful to do that for some of these changes. For example, on some of the vestry members or some of the voting things, just to avoid some misunderstanding later, it's probably good to do that. If you're not aware, on the diocesan website, there are some sample bylaws that the chancellors had put together, one for Texas, one for New Mexico. Very simple ones if you don't have any in place, which you should. Those will need to be updated based on what this convention approves. But also we'll work on some language of some little inserts that could be made to existing bylaws if you want to have some inserts on those for some of the changes that come up. So at this point, if there are any other questions people have, please let us know and we can respond to those. About not questions in general, questions about the canons and constitutional changes.
The floor is open.
I have to bill you for the others, so that's why I want to make that clear.
The floor is open for your questions about the proposed canonical or constitutional changes. And you'll remember that the constitutional changes take 2 conventions to approve. We approved them last year, so this year is the final approval, if you so choose. Canonical changes take immediate effect after they are approved, so the canonical changes before us today do not require 2 years. Yes, please.
Bill Stone from Epiphany in Socorro. I had a question about the chapel designation being added. There seem to be 2 sorts of chapels, parish chapels and diocesan chapels. I seem to be hissing into this microphone a bit. Epiphany is a mission, but we have a smaller congregation up in Magdalena that really functions much the way a parish chapel is described. And I'm wondering whether there are any issues connected with that or whether we just leave it the way it is and ignore the chapel designation.
And I'll just address 2, and the bishop may want to as well, to talk a little bit more about chapels. I don't know if you want to address first or have me answer that directly.
I'd be happy to if the parliamentarian allows me to do that. Yeah, okay. Shall I go ahead and start, Clyde? Okay. Thank you, Bill. The congregation in Magdalena is a great example of what we're hoping to work with these chapels. The congregation in Magdalena is a real thing. And yet there's not a category for it in our canons right now that makes sense. And so the hope with having chapels sort of in general is to say there are legitimate worshiping communities that are smaller than missions, but they're real things. And we want to acknowledge them and have them be active participants in our life. That's the big picture. Our thinking is that there are two ways such a chapel might exist. One might be that a parish might start one, for example. Many of our congregations were started by other congregations. For example, the Church of the Holy Faith was started by the congregation of St. Paul's in Las Vegas. And so there are often times when a congregation grows large enough that it will start a new congregation. And part of the thought is instead of them starting a mission, they could start a chapel. And that chapel may or may not ever grow. The point is it's its own thing. And so the thought would be that a congregation may wish to do that. If the congregation starts the chapel, the congregation would have responsibility for the chapel and its governance and financial security and all that kind of stuff. But we imagine that there will be, and there in fact are, congregations that another congregation might not want to take responsibility for, but the diocese might. And so we might start, for example, the Church Unbound, that is an ecumenical community that has just begun here, working with people on the street in Albuquerque. Rather than make that a mission that needs to have confirmed adult communicants in good standing to be representative, we could recognize that community as a diocesan chapel or as a congregational chapel started by the cathedral. The difference would be who is ultimately responsible for it. Is it the cathedral or is it the bishop? But the point is that we would want to represent and recognize and involve those smaller congregations as real things, because they are real things. We think it would also allow us to start new ministries without having to get enough confirmed adult communicants in good standing to qualify as a mission. It would also allow us, if a congregation is, for example, our congregation in Grants has not had enough people to keep it going. We haven't sold it because I don't want to close it. But now it's just a building. It's not kind of a thing. But it could be a diocesan chapel, and we could make sure that the Eucharist is celebrated there a number of times a year as we continue to work with the community in Grants on having an Episcopal Church presence there. So this is the idea behind the concept of a chapel and why there are two different ways a chapel might exist. A congregation may wish to, give birth to a separate entity, a separate congregation. It could be a house church, or it could be a congregation that has its own integrity. Or the diocese may choose to do so.
And just to supplement on that, and following that, missions have a lot of different rules. I mean, parishes, of course, do in minimum requirements. So do missions under our canons. By allowing a chapels, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. They'll be unique. They'll be customized for the situation. So depending on how many people and what kind of situation, you can make different rules for that too. And it looks like another question.
Yes, please.
Russell Polhamus, All Saints Church, El Paso, Texas. First of all, let me start out with the good stuff. The chapel thing really sounds great. Most of our churches in El Paso are in older established areas. And I know that all the churches probably have people from Horizon City to some of the newer areas way out on Montana Boulevard. I think it's an opportunity for those churches that have people that can help support something start out in those areas is ideal. As our congregations are getting older, this allows us to bring in a young, youthful group of people, because most of those people are in the new homes. thriving on new jobs, doing new things, and are very creative, where some of us maybe have lost our creation. So with that said, let me move on to my main issue, and I appreciate the Chancellor. He was kind of in a hurry to get in here, and I was kind of in a hurry to get in here. My point being was for our church to adopt that, because if we adopt this change with the vestry members and whatnot today, it is basically being mandated for every church in the diocese to accept that. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So just because we don't have it in our bylaws doesn't mean we get to slide by without it.
Correct.
Okay, so in fairness to our members, we should intentionally, at our annual meeting, put those amendments in there, if it passes today, that this is what it's going to be, and when we vote on our new constitutional change, that would be in there.
I think it should be. That's what I was, yes, excuse me. That's why I was suggesting. I think it makes it to avoid misunderstandings later, and so people understand your bylaws are consistent with the canons. You don't have to look in two different places to figure out. They're all right there.
Okay, and then the other thing, I know there's discussion because I was in on that video, which is, I appreciate you all doing that. It gives us the chance to be aware of. But if you have people that are continually on the vestry because we rotate around like pigeons on a rooftop, is there a way for us to work around that, or do we just have to call the bishop's office and get approval? What is that going to be? Because we will be having our annual meeting in January, and with that, I'll let you give me the final answer.
And that was was that last one about the term limits?
Yes.
Okay, the term limits issue. And that is something and it's just for junior and senior wardens. And it's pretty, I believe, if I recall, it's 6 years, 6 consecutive years, and there is some exceptions where the bishop can allow it to extend it on an annual basis later. You know, depending on the circumstances, there's going to be some situations where that's going to make perfect sense. You may be in the middle of a transition of a rector or something where it may make sense to allow a senior warden to continue another year. I think under this proposal, you do need to check with the bishop's office first to get an extension if necessary. This is actually something that did come up during the year from the diocese as a whole. And I will encourage people in the future, if you have something that comes up or you think there may be some changes, let one of the members of myself or one of the chancellors or Michael Perko or the bishop's office know, because we are going to try annually kind of look at some of these changes. I know I've already got a few things for next year I need to take up, and one will have to do with Snickers over Reese's, but we'll get that good.
Yes, I'll say the thing with the term limits is we want to balance the need for there to be fresh energy and creativity, and for there to be opportunity for new people to emerge as leaders, as junior wardens and senior wardens in our congregations. And so the idea about saying 6 years is a pretty good run. It's probably good to give people a break, you know, as a general thing. But it's also probably good for the congregation to have new leadership every now and then. However, as the Chancellor mentioned, there are certain situations where there may not be enough people to have a rotation like that if there's not that many pigeons on the roof. It's a great image, by the way. Thank you for that one. Or, as the Chancellor said, sometimes a congregation, you know, let's say in year 6 of the senior warden's tenure, the congregation goes into a transition, and the whole congregation is saying, please let's keep that senior warden in place while we go through this transition. Call the bishop's office, make sure that we're aware, and we want to support you in that. So the idea behind this is the general rule of having new blood is a good idea, and we recognize there are exceptions. We want to meet your needs. That's the bottom line.
Steve Stevens, St. Philip's in Epiphany. On the idea of the chapel, I think it's a fantastic notion, and when Bill raised it earlier, of course, Epiphany is a mission. And the two categories you spoke about were diocesan and parish. Now, obviously, you're our parish priest as a mission, so regardless of which way we went with it, you'd still be our parish priest. But I guess I'm assuming that the vision encompasses missions that have an outreach like Magdalena.
Yes, so there are currently two categories, parishes and missions. So the mission is the smallest organized congregation. And you're right, the bishop is the rector of all the missions. And the point behind that is, if a congregation is not financially able to afford its own full-time clergy with benefits, they need to have the support of the rest of us in the diocese. And the bishop needs to take a more careful interest in making sure that the pastoral care and the sacramental needs of the congregation are being met. So that's the distinction between mission and parish. The thought is that there needs to be a smaller category, and that's where the chapel is coming from. So the chapel proposal doesn't change what a mission is, and it doesn't change what a parish is, it just adds a third category. Did I miss the question?
No, I guess what I was saying is, when you spoke about it originally, you spoke about diocesan chapels and parish chapels. But Epiphany already has a mission chapel. And I don't think you intended to exclude missions from being able to establish chapels also if it was a possibility for them.
That's a helpful question. I think as a general rule, a congregation that's not able financially to support itself yet probably should not start a new congregation at that point. And so such an arrangement would probably end up being a diocesan chapel. Probably.
And of course there is the exception because Epiphany does support itself. But it's still a mission. So
right,
I
it
guess
supports
we're
itself as a
anomaly.
mission. That's correct. That's correct. The current arrangement does not allow a mission to create a chapel.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that the diocese couldn't create a chapel in collaboration with the people in the mission.
Yeah.
The important thing would be the buck stops with the bishop then, not with the mission. That's the important part.
Thanks.
Okay.
No other questions? Oh.
No. Jill Klein, sorry, and it's not a joke, Holy Trinity and St. Paul's Peace. I mean, it could be a joke. I do not have a chapel or a mission question. There was something else that raised a thought process for me in the language around congregations that might need to dissolve and the legal entities status, 501c3s and foundations. And I'm curious in our diocese, because I'm not sure any of us, whether we're a parish or a mission, should have separate legal status from the diocese anyway. So I'm just curious, how many foundations and nonprofits do we have within the church structure that aren't actually managed or by the diocese? I mean, we all have to have payroll tax IDs.
Well, I can probably address some of that. Some of them may not have all the factual background. Most parishes are probably incorporated, I would assume, and all of them, but not all of them have to be, but most of them probably are incorporated. Missions should not be incorporated under the canons as a general rule. That's because they're really under the diocese. So I think that answers part of it, but then there are also certain congregations, generally parishes, that on occasion had formed separate affiliated foundations. Sometimes maybe it's run a soup kitchen, maybe it's to do something else. Sometimes it was just to park some money from something. And one of the changes that is being proposed in these canonical changes is to no longer, a church cannot form an affiliated foundation or other entity without getting some approval through the diocesan process, to have a little more check on that. There are some that exist. I don't know how many that exist, but it's something that on occasion has appeared to be a problem that we thought we ought to, at least from now going forward, you need to get approval beforehand. We thought that was the approach to take. Did I answer that question?
If I could speak to that a little bit. I think it's important for us all to really understand that all of the property of the diocese we hold in trust on behalf of the Episcopal Church. That's because the Episcopal Church sent missionary bishops for decades to help us get going. We didn't just create ourselves. And similarly, all of the congregations in the diocese hold their property and assets in trust for the Episcopal Church and the diocese, because the congregations didn't start themselves. We all were birthed, if you will, from the Episcopal Church and the seminaries and the clergy that were sent to help support those congregations. So even if a parish is incorporated under law, that does not mean it is independent of the diocese. And it's important for me to say that because I've had vestry meetings where that point was not clearly understood. So I want to be clear. Legal incorporation doesn't mean you're not subject to the canons of the church. It doesn't mean you're separate from the church. However, a parish may decide that you're starting a school, or you're starting a food pantry, or some other charitable organization where it makes sense for that new thing you're starting to be legally independent from the congregation. Does that make sense? In that instance, the congregation is taking the initiative to create something else, and we want to make sure that that congregation has the advice of the chancellors about how to create such an organization and has all the legal documents in place so that you've thought through all the issues about that. And that's why, if you're going to start something new, we want you to talk to the diocese about it so the chancellors can get involved in helping guide you to create that new thing in a way that has all the legal safeguards and insurance and all the stuff that sometimes we in church don't think about. The chancellors are always thinking for us. And so we want to make sure that we have that support and that you're availing yourselves of it. So you can still create a new thing like a school or a soup kitchen or that kind of thing. That's not a problem. I also want to point out, and some of you will remember, that going back in the history of the diocese, there was a time when there was concern, as I understand it, there was concern that the whole diocese might leave the Episcopal Church. And there were congregations that were thinking that they might want to leave the Episcopal Church. And so I have met with vestries that, being worried that the diocese might leave, a congregation that wanted to stay with the Episcopal Church started an independent foundation and put money from the parish into that foundation as a hedge against the diocese leaving. I have met with other vestries where the congregation at the time thought they might want to leave. So they created an independent foundation, took church assets into that foundation so that if they left, the vestry couldn't stop them from taking some of the money with them. None of that's supposed to happen, folks. Those moves were a part of the brokenness of the time, and we still have congregations where there is a foundation that is not under the control of the vestry. And so there's a sizable bit of money that should belong to the church, but the vestry doesn't have control of that. And it's problematic. And it's a sign of the brokenness of the past. So part of the healing that I'm hoping for as we work together, as you trust I'm not trying to take over your buildings and sell them off, as we have clear and transparent financial arrangements, as when you all don't like the way we're voting at convention, we change it so you like it. Like, we need to be in relationship with each other so that there's mutual thriving. And the idea that there would be foundations not under the control of the vestry is not a healthy way to operate. So this would make it impossible for that to happen without the bishop's approval going forward. But I also want to address you all in order to say, as I come around and meet with your congregations, if you have a foundation, I would like to meet with the foundation board in order to talk about that situation. Because I know of vestries where the vestry is in control of some of the assets, but there is a St. Swithin's Foundation that has a bunch of other assets that the vestry has to beg for or ask permission to use. And that's not the way it should work under the canons, because under the canons, the vestry should be responsible for and able to use all of the resources that have been donated by people to the Episcopal Church. And so it's not okay for us to take donations given to the church and sneak them over into a foundation. So I want you all to hear from me, I'm looking to heal the diocese going forward and to clear up some of those foundations that were founded at a very painful, in the war years, as I call it.
Thank you. And because of a conversation you and I had, Bishop, in the past, that's exactly what I wanted to hear said, with everyone to hear it, because there are some really mixed messages out there about how it's supposed to go and how it gets used or misused. Thank you.
Taken by the silence, no further questions.
All right. Thank you all. Very helpful discussion. Very helpful discussion. And now I will turn to the Secretary.
Bishop, at this point, just clarifying where we are in terms of procedure, that was an open question and answer time. And the constitutional and canonical changes, we will be working on two separate motions, both to be introduced by the bishop, two separate resolutions, rather, to be introduced by the bishop. And we will be voting on each of them independently. First, the constitution and canonical changes, which you are about to see on the screen in front, or excuse me, first the constitutional changes, which we have to vote on separately. This is the second reading. And then the canonical changes. So, Bishop.
So the chair will first turn on the microphone, and then the chair will move that we adopt the following resolution. Resolved that by resolution brought to the convention by the special request of the bishop pursuant to Canon 2, Section 5, the amendments to the Constitution of the Episcopal Diocese of the Rio Grande, which were read and approved by a 2/3 majority of those present and voting at the 69th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of the Rio Grande, which are changes to the title, the preamble, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, and Article 6, as published and read to the 70th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of the Rio Grande. B, and they hereby are approved by a 2/3 majority of convention with a quorum present, dated this 12th day of November, 2022. The motion is before you. Is there a second? Second. Seeing the second, is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand.
Bishop, we are...
Oh no, we are required to have 2/3, so we're going to do it with real numbers. Sorry, we have to.
So friends...
Start logging in, please.
Well, as soon as we get the ballot open. Friends, you will see here shortly, as soon as the site decides to cooperate with me, a ballot sounds like the kids are having fun. I know for a fact one of those screams was from my eldest son.
And that reminds me of a humorous poem which I heard on the radio on my way in this morning. I'll try to quote it accurately. It's a short, like haiku type poem, and it goes something like this. I saw today an advertisement for a movie entitled Children. I do not know what that movie is about, but I just love hearing all of the advertisements. Children now playing everywhere.
All right, friends, I will direct us back to the election runner page. The ballot is running soon. I have been told the page should refresh in 60 seconds. So, friends, what I would recommend at this time, Bishop, if The balloting would remain open, Bishop, I would say, if we take a break until...
No, let me suggest that while you all are voting, if you need a stretch, by all means, you know?
That's what I'm trying to find out. Right. All right, friends, I am told that our ballot is live. So please refresh the election runner page until such time as it appears. The ballot will be labeled "Vote on changes to the DRG Constitution, parentheses, second reading." I know, this is... A wise man once said, "The internet is like a series of tubes." I'm glad one person got that joke. And sometimes it seems there's a bit of a lag. So we'll just keep hitting that beautiful refresh button. There it is.
Keep hitting refresh and you will find it. And again, if you require technical assistance, please raise your hand. Help is on the way. The chair recognizes the Reverend Michael Drinkwater.
Thank you, Right Reverend Sir. What kind of person was Boaz before he got married?
I don't know, Michael. What kind of person was Boaz before he got married?
He was pretty ruthless.
Yes, please, at the microphone.
Thank you. Rebecca Darden from Holy Family in Santa Fe.
Will the gathered assembly please simmer down, please? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'd like to commend the convention on having recognized climate change this morning. That was really wonderful, the two speakers. This is as loud as I get, so you'll have to listen up. It is. The question is, or the issue is, that we listened this morning about climate change and the very dire change that we need to face. Yet, as soon as they finished speaking and we took a break, I did not hear anything about climate change and how the diocese is planning to do something. There's nothing about solar energy. I didn't see any recycling bins. I did see a lot of styrofoam and a lot of plastic that did not get recycled or rinsed out. And I wonder if you could talk about that issue of how the diocese is actually going to change and the convention is going to change in order to help with climate change. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. And The first thing I want to say is you're entirely right. We have a long way to go in terms of both our relationship of our awareness of the earth and also some serious conversations about what we're going to do about it. I have already had a number of conversations with people in the convention. Some pointed out, as you have correctly done, the styrofoam and the plastic. Others have come forward and said that they were not happy with the one-sided presentation of the issue this morning and are hopeful that we will hear other voices from the diocese. And so, as I called for a diocesan task force to focus on these issues, and as I said, I want it to involve all of us. My hope is that we will have a rigorous and thorough conversation about the climate, about energy, about food, about recycling, about all of it, and that we as a diocese will begin to put together a strategy to make our voice heard and real change to happen. And I completely acknowledge that this is the very beginning of that conversation. That's my response. And I also want to note that we have had a lot of interest in participating on that task force as it is being formed. So I hear a lot of energy in the room, and I'm grateful about that. Thank you.
Friends, is there anyone left waiting to cast a ballot? Seeing none, our ballot on the vote on the changes to the 2023 Constitution is closed. The resolution passes.
Thank you all.
No, you need to read the...
Next, coming up before the convention is the resolution which is moved by the chair approving the canonical changes, and the chair will tap dance a little bit to give the secretary time to get the ballot loading. And by tap dancing, let me just take this moment to say, when a diocese is looking to do electronic voting in a setting like this, there are a number of options. And we explored what other dioceses have done, and we're disappointed to learn that for many dioceses, they hired a firm that brought in voting clickers that were handed out to everybody, and those types of arrangements cost between $30,000 and $50,000. We decided not to do that. The Secretary of Convention then started scouring the internet for reasonable cost ways to do this using our own devices and the Wi-Fi net that we were able to install using the cathedral's existing Wi-Fi. So just for your information, because it's kind of fun, we are paying per ballot for this. How much per ballot are we paying? $36. We're paying $36 per ballot. So it's much better than $50,000 or $30,000 even. So I want to just say that all by saying I want you to understand that we are trying to be good stewards of the resources of the diocese, and that we are grateful for your patience in using your own device, in waiting for the thing to load, and etc. Thank you. We are sometimes a scrappy diocese that gets it done, and so thank you for living into that. And now the chair moves the following resolution approving canonical changes. Resolved that by resolution brought to the convention by the special request of the bishop pursuant to Canon 2, Section 5, the amendments to the canons of the Episcopal Diocese of the Rio Grande, which are changes to canons 1, 2, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, and 21 as published and read at the 70th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of the Rio Grande. B, and they hereby are approved by a majority vote of convention with a quorum present, dated this 12th day of November, 2022. And again, to make sure that we have a majority in numbers, we're going to spend $36.
That's move that.
That is so moved. Is there a second? I see the second. Is there discussion? The chair sees no one approaching the microphone. And so Mr. Secretary, are we ready?
It says we're ready.
It says we're ready. Start refreshing.
Yep, so please to the election runner page and hit that refresh button. There we are, friends.
There it is. There it is. The chair is channeling his inner drink water and feeling grateful that this convention is so refreshing.
Mr. Parliamentarian, are you able to censure the president of the convention?
The chair recognizes with some trepidation the Reverend Michael Drinkwater in his fabulous blazer.
All right. I think this is the last ballot, so this is the last joke I have this morning, afternoon, evening. How do you know that atoms are Anglo-Catholic?
No, sir. How do you know that atoms are Anglo-Catholic?
They have mass.
Thank you, Michael.
Friends, if you require technical assistance, please show your hand. Keep it raised. Hey, Mandy, can we catch you up front for technical assistance, please? Friends, is there anyone who is still waiting to cast their ballot? All right.
If you have not yet cast your ballot, will you please raise your hand if you have not yet if you're still voting, raise your hand. It looks like we've got the votes.
All right, friends, seeing no outstanding votes, the ballot is closed. 2022 canonical changes pass. And that concludes.
Thank you, everybody. What is next on our agenda are the courtesy resolutions. This is an opportunity for us to give thanks to a number of folks for some wonderful things. And so the chair calls upon the secretary, who is also the chair of the resolutions committee, in order to move these resolutions. We'll read each of them so that we all get a chance to celebrate with the joy, but then we will have a vote of acclamation at the end.
All right, so as the chair of the resolutions committee, I move the following be received by the 70th Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande. Be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande express its heartfelt gratitude for all of the individuals and organizations, especially the late Reverend Thomas Gray, and all those who made efforts big and small to bring the life, work, and sacrifice of Father Ted Howden to the attention of the wider church. While we continue to honor Father Howden on December 11th, we look forward to sharing his witness throughout the church in lesser feasts and fasts. Be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande express its heartfelt gratitude for the ministries of Grace Episcopal Church in Carlsbad, New Mexico. We applaud the stalwart faith of the people of Grace Church and the steadfast leadership of their rector, the Reverend Rodney Hurst, as they work together to be the Episcopal Church in Carlsbad since their founding in 1890. May God continue to shine the light of Christ in their lives. Be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande offers its thanks to the clergy and people of the Cathedral of St. John in Albuquerque, New Mexico, for hosting the Diocesan Convention this year. Our particular gratitude goes to the Very Rev. Christina Malden and the Reverend Canon Spencer Brown and all the volunteers for their hospitality and work on our behalf. Be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande express its sincere gratitude for the gifts and talents of the diocesan choir shared at the Convention Eucharist. We are especially thankful for the skillful coordination of Dr. Maxine Thevenot and Dr. Edmund Connolly, who provided direction for this remarkable group of musicians. Be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande express its sincere gratitude for the talent and genius of Father Henry L. Atkins Jr. and Sister Joan Brown in offering their expertise on creation care to this convention, and prays that their urgent mission of caution and hope are heard and heeded throughout the Diocese of the Rio Grande, throughout the Episcopal Church and beyond. Be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande expresses sincere gratitude to the Reverend Canon Spencer Brown, Reverend Meg Hunn, the Reverend Christina Malden, Miss Mandy Mendoza, Miss Ana Reza, and the Reverend Michael Wallens in sharing their wisdom and experience with the members of this diocesan convention. And be it resolved that this 2022 Convention of the Diocese of the Rio Grande express its gratitude for the life and devoted ministries of the Reverend Stephen R. Caldwell, the Reverend Anna L. Gaddy, the Reverend Pamela L. Graham, the Reverend John Mar Aden, the Reverend Bud Milner, the Reverend Thomas R. Polk, the Reverend John T. Rawlinson, the Reverend Ernest St. John, commending their souls and the souls of all the departed to the mercy of God through our Lord Jesus Christ.
The chair suggests that we vote on this by acclamation. Thank you, dear diocese. This brings the business of our convention largely to a close. I want to mention that each year the bishop has the opportunity to acknowledge certain individuals for their extraordinary service in the diocese. This year, and I do so by giving out the bishop's medal, and some of you in this room have received. This year, I'm awarding 2 bishop's medals. And I invite you to please join me in thanking Camila and Cesar Gonzalez, 2 young Episcopalian leaders from St. Christopher's Episcopal Church in El Paso. Camila and Cesar tirelessly served this summer as we began offering shelter to asylum seekers. Camila is a freshman at UTEP, and Cesar was confirmed at St. Christopher's earlier this year. They were both present week in and week out throughout the summer, serving as the hands and feet of Christ, offering gracious welcome, and helping to build up the ministry into the shape that it has today. Just in the summer months, they were a welcoming face to over 200 asylum seekers on behalf of the Diocese of the Rio Grande. And therefore, it is my honor today to present the Bishop's Medal for the year 2022 to Camila Gonzalez and Cesar Gonzalez. They are not able to be with us today, but we honor them nonetheless, and we are finding a way to celebrate their ministry in person in El Paso at a time coming up soon. So thank you to both of them. We now have just a couple of concluding announcements before you jump in your vehicles. The first is that there will be a survey coming around. As you all know, this is the first time back in person. The Diocesan Council debated long and hard, literally for months, trying to figure out how to do this. We decided to do this instead of renting a conference center and having that expense. We decided to try this cathedral thing. So we are eager to hear kind of all of the good, the bad, and the ugly, what you thought about it, in order to help the Diocesan Council begin planning next year's diocesan convention. And with that, Mr. Secretary, you have a couple of concluding announcements, I believe. And then we'll have a closing prayer from the outgoing chair of our standing committee. Would you like to come forward just so that we're ready for that? Thank you.
No, friends, we do appreciate your being here. I believe, Mary, did we find a solution on where to drop name tags? All right, so as you are departing, if you would please drop your name tags in the basket that you find near this entrance. The paper is not what we're looking for, but those, as a way of saving costs, the lanyards and the holders are of great price. So please drop those by the basket on your way out. I believe that's the only concluding announcement I have, sir.
Very good. Just a reminder that there's a committee meeting for the standing committee will be meeting in the Dean's Lounge, which is down the hallway, and take a left and keep coming around. There's one agenda item. The standing committee needs to elect a chair, so we have a chair of the standing committee. The disciplinary committee will be meeting on the second floor conference room, also to elect a chair, so we have a chair of our discipline board. And with that, thank you for your service. We're in your hands.
Bishop, before we pray, I would like to take one point of privilege and say that throughout this convention, you have thanked all of the folks who make our diocesan ministry possible. And I would now like to thank you for 4 years of service with us.
Thank you all. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop, for your prayerful presence, for the example of faith with which you lead us, and we are blessed by you. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious God of light, life, and love, we give you thanks for the people and ministries of the Diocese of the Rio Grande. Fill our hearts with curiosity, trust, and joy as we go forth from this gathering. Fill our minds with wisdom and imagination as we seek to reflect your vision for our present and future. And fill our entire beings with the desire to follow your Christ with all that we have and all that we are. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please be safe going home. Godspeed.